We're going to get started here in just a minute, but before we do, we have a little extra treat for you. This is a video that actually appeared today on Bloomberg, and we thought it's timely because it talks about what we're going to talk about the next hour. So we're going to play this little video for you before we actually begin.
Serial entrepreneurs, and this writer, Jeff Hayden, says, if you're any of these, you don't need to tell people you are these things. Everyone should be result-oriented. If you're not result-oriented, why are you working? And if you're a serial,
comes across as obnoxious or
exactly. So just say you're an architect instead of saying you're a passionate builder of of large buildings so that people can communicate better. You're an architect. That's it.
Okay, yeah. That's good advice.
Absolutely.
And this was interesting. This story here about the most important interview question of all time.
Right. So here it is. The one question you need to ask is, what is the one task or project that you're most proud of in your career? You ask that question. That's the start of it, though. The Lou Adler, who's an HR consultant, says basically you ask that question, then you dig. And you say, why is that? What was the team like? What did you do right? What did you do wrong? And you stay on that one task or one project, and you can learn a lot about a person.
So as an interviewee, you better be prepared
yes.
for that question.
Absolutely.
Have a good answer then.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that was just a little sound bite that happened on Bloomberg TV this morning, so we're going to be getting into that a little bit further today.
Worried about what they should be
Sorry,
doing.
JJ.
That's okay. So welcome, everyone. My name is JJ. I'm the Director of Operations for the Adler Group, and I'm just going to be hanging out in the background today, helping to facilitate some questions. But today's discussion will be led by Lou Adler, the gentleman mentioned in that Bloomberg video. He is the CEO of the Adler Group. He's an Amazon.com best-selling author and a keynote speaker and thought leader in the industry of hiring and getting hired. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the call over to Lou. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I forgot one thing. We want this webinar to be very interactive, but we have too many people on the line to unmute people. So we're going to be interactive using the questions panel. There should be a questions panel in your GoToWebinar panel. We're going to use that for more than questions. We're going to ask for your feedback, your experiences, your opinions, as well as we really want to answer your questions. So we may refer to that box as the chat area. So if you hear us refer to it as the chat area, what we're really meaning is the questions panel because it's much more than questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the call over to Lou. Thanks, Lou. Lou, are you there?
Hi, everybody. This is Lou Adler. Yes, I had it on mute because I was trying to do something else, which was turn that video off. Hi, everybody. This is Lou Adler. Most of you have not heard my voice, I wouldn't think, because you've come as a result of this LinkedIn article. So I thought it was a pretty cool article. What I want to do is, if anybody's tweeting, we can use the hashtag MIQ, and we can look back at what you guys are thinking about this whole thing. So let me kind of, maybe you kind of put that in there, JJ.
Yep, I'll do that.
Hashtag MIQ so everyone can see it. But let me do this to make sure that the chat is working. What hit you most about that question? I'm going to kind of give you the answer to the question, but why did you like it? I mean, I'll say this. There was it kind of blew me away. 280,000 people read that posting, the most important interview question of all time. Of the comments, which were 1,000 or so, small fraction, but 95% of those were positive. Why did you like it? If you didn't comment or not, you either liked it or didn't. What about it? Maybe the title got you to read it, so that was the whole point of the title. But what did you like about the article? Just kind of put that in the chat area, just so I get a sense of that to see what your focus is. And I'm going to kind of go through some ideas, and we'll try to make this informal, and we're going to ask questions. So I got a little bit of content I want to do as to why it came up. But why'd you like it or dislike it? Doesn't matter. I'm not seeing any chat. Until I see about 10 of them, I can't do anything. So start chatting, guys. This is how we're also going to. This is the warm up.
And Lou, just to make sure you want to look in your questions panel as well. That's what they'll appear.
Aha, that's why I'm not seeing that. Thank you. I'm using a different thing. Aha. Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad you said that, Jay, because I would have seen that. Why haven't I been asking that? Yes, as a hiring manager, narrows the focus. Focus in. Okay, we got them. Good. Thank you very much, JJ. I forgot that we're on a different system here, guys, for webinars. We have big webinars. We do a lot of training, but I see it somewhere else. Okay, so I mean, it's a pretty interesting question. There's a lot more to it than the answer, though. So let me kind of go through some ideas that I have here. And again, ask lots of questions. JJ will be monitoring the questions, and I want to make it as interactive as possible here. So, but here it is. I mean, I had to say, I saw this link, this Dilbert cartoon, and to me it says the whole tale. And I actually have license. I bought this license to use the cartoon, didn't buy the cartoon, license to use it. But as a recruiter, being in this industry for 30 years, this seems so true. So if anybody wants to comment on the question. Guys, this is what happens, is we interview people, and if you're a candidate, you get interviewed, the manager doesn't know the job, they ask you a bunch of stupid questions, and they are stupid questions, they're irrelevant. And if you're the candidate and you don't know what the job is, you're answering a bunch of questions, and it's problematic whether you'll get the job, and if you get the job, whether you're qualified for the job, or even if you want the job. So the idea is, I'm a recruiter, and I work for a living. That's a bad thing to say. I worked in industry. I was running a company when I was very, very young. I just decided I like recruiting better than running a company, and I was really good at it. But I liked being a recruiter. But I realized that if you don't know what you're looking for, just like making a product. I was in aerospace, I was in automotive, and I was in consumer electronics back when consumer electronics was the first handheld calculators. Give you some dating there. If you didn't know what you're looking for, how could you find it? If you're building something without a spec, how could you do it? So early on, when I started becoming a recruiter, I realized if you don't know the job, you're not even in the game. So here's the reason why the whole situation came about. And this is what I've seen as a recruiter. And I work with candidates, and for 30 years I've worked with candidates, good candidates, weak candidates, great candidates who weren't good interviewers, worked with hiring managers, good hiring managers, those that didn't know how to interview. So I've worked the gamut. I try to figure out something that would get everybody on the same page. The first one was, when you take an assignment, if they don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to find it, but you'll hire somebody anyway. So I always said, you got to define the job. What do people need to do? Don't tell me they need 10 years experience. I couldn't care. What do they do with that 10 years experience? Oh, they do this. They build a team, and they launch a new product. Fine. If I can find someone with 5 years experience, would you see that person? Yes. So it was always about define the work. And if you didn't define the work, what overrode the decision on the hiring manager's side is how technical you are, how brilliant you are, or the gut feeling, oh, I think there's a good person. And I heard the other day, I was in Chicago working with the director of talent of a big company, major vice president came in, president job, met the president, remarkable woman from what I understand, who for this VP job, the president didn't like her because she had a nervous laugh. So 20 hours or 40 hours of work, the woman didn't get the job. She flew in from Detroit to go to Chicago, didn't get it for some stupid reason. Well, that bugs me, guys, as a recruiter. It should bug you guys if candidates or hiring managers. But people make dumb decisions for stupid reasons. When they make, if you didn't hire her because she couldn't do the work and didn't want to do the work, perfectly fine. But understand the job, and then don't use dumb ideas to hire people. The interview, here's what I say. Most people, just the methodology in which engineers interview is to look at deep technical skills. Some people make emotions based on whether you're a good first impression if you're articulate. It doesn't matter if you can't do the job, and it's the whole job, not just a part of the job. So individual interviewing is flawed. Group decision-making is equally flawed. The hiring manager doesn't make the decision by him or herself, guys. So if you're a candidate and if you're a hiring manager or a recruiter, you know this. You get interviewed. If you pass muster, everybody you interviewed that day sits around a room and discusses you. And these discussions are crazy. Didn't like the person. Doesn't fit. Doesn't do this well. Does this great. Great technical. Not this. Great this. And it's all. Then they all vote. Yes, 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 no. And the no votes count for more than a yes vote, primarily because nobody wants to. I'll be. They're risk averse. The bosses, whether it's yes or no, carry more weight than the subordinates. I've sat in hundreds of these rooms. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. So that's why the one-question interview is the one-question interview. It's also on the candidate side. Why are you taking this job? Oh, look, it's close and it's because of more money. Well, it should take it because it's a good career move. So that's why this whole thing came about. The one question interview is, tell me about your most significant work you ever did. Now, it might take 20 minutes to get the answer. When did you do it? Why did you do it? Why are you chosen? What were the problems you faced? How did you make decisions? How did you overcome challenges? Did you make the plan, not make the plan? I mean, it's a lot of work, guys, sitting there and pulling it out of a candidate. And I, as an interviewer, believe it's my responsibility to pull that information out of a candidate. It's not your responsibility to give it to me. It's your responsibility to give me the correct answer. And you cannot fake it. You cannot fake it. Let me give you one quick story, and then I'll see if there's any questions here yet. I was interviewing a candidate. Hopefully you're not on this call. It was 10 years ago. Candidate said, I said, what's your biggest accomplishment? He said he turned around a company on the East Coast. So what did you do first? I said, I replaced 20 people. I then said, who were the 20 people? He said, oh, there was somebody in sales, there was somebody in IT, there was somebody in the office. I said, that sounds like 3 or 4 people. He said, no, it was 5 or 6 people. And I said, I thought you told me it was 20 people. And he said, well, they didn't all work for me. I said, that's okay. Who did they work for? And then he came up with another person in, I think, marketing. I said, well, that's 7 people. Then he said, well, maybe it wasn't 20 people. I said, well, you told me it was 20. It's now 7. He said, well, maybe it was 15 people. I said, well, who are the other 8? And then he hangs up. It cannot be faked. What you're really trying to do is paint a complete word picture of that accomplishment. Now, if you're nervous and you can't say it, I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and kind of work with you. But the information gained from that is phenomenal, and it cannot be faked. You can be the greatest salesperson in the world, but you cannot fake the truth. So part of it is the one question is to clarify job expectations up front. I want to understand the biggest thing you've ever done to see if what I need done is comparable. You might be too big, you might be too light, or you might be just right. If it's not a career move, fine. It's not the right job for you, and I'm okay with that. But it's based on objective criteria. I also force managers to ask that question to make sure that they're making the right judgment. There's a host of things that go on. I just kind of want to set the stage here. I'm going to do one little thing here to say why I believe this to be important. And this is you as candidates. You can kind of think about this yourself. The biggest problem of all with interviewing and hiring, on everybody's part, is that we have 3 big buckets of decision making. The having bucket is all your skills and all the stuff you brought to the table. And it's what's on the job description. Must have 5 years of this, 2 years of this, have done that, go to this school, be all the stuff you have to have. Getting is what the person gets on the day they start. If I get this, you get a salary, you get a location, you get a company parking lot, you get a benefit, you get stuff the day you start. Then it's when you start on the job, it's stuff you do. It's the real work. I got to build a team, I got to design a circuit, I got to make calls, I got whatever stuff you do stuff. And the becoming is if you really do it well, you get promoted. But all the decision stuff that people make can all be put into one of those 4 big buckets. The problem is that people get screened out on having what they have. A lot of people can do that work with 3 years experience, they don't need 10 years experience. You still got to be able to do the work, but if you don't have some arbitrary level of skills, it makes no sense, so you get screened out. Candidates then screen themselves out by saying, well, where's the location, what's the money, I'm not interested. The truth is, all of that stuff is variable. What really should be the decision is what you're going to do. And you as a candidate, if the hiring manager doesn't ask you this, this is in my book, if the hiring manager doesn't know what they're going to do, said very early in the interview, say, excuse me, I read your job description, it doesn't make a lot of sense, or it's not clear to me. Could you just tell me one of the 2 big things the person needs to do in this job to be considered successful? Because I'd like to talk about my background and how it might fit. That's how a candidate can take control of the interview. Shame on the interviewer if they don't know that already, but I got to tell you, 90% won't know it. And that's the problem when I made in the initial posting. I said, most managers don't know how to interview. How could you possibly interview someone when you don't know the job? It's impossible. You might find a good person for the wrong job. And I think you see a lot of companies, they got brilliant people, but they're not getting projects done on time, and they don't have the customer interface properly, or whatever it is. They haven't thought about the whole job. So the problem is we advertise and phone screen on having and getting. Candidates decide, I'm not going to think about this because of the money, particularly if you have multiple opportunities. And yet, when you actually decide on a job, comparing jobs, if you have that luxury, and if you're employed, you're not going to take another job if you're already employed unless the one is what you can do and become is better. And then first impressions have this huge impact. So number one, we screen out some good people. We don't focus on what they need to do. And then we overvalue first impression. Then we go through this rigmarole of interviewing, people ask a bunch of idiotic questions, and we come up with an answer. So that was the whole point of the most significant accomplishment question, is how do you get around all that? You focus on what people need to do. You understand if they do it well, what can they become? You ask them, what's the biggest thing you've ever done? And if it's not comparable to what I need done, I'm sorry, you're not in the game. But if you're close, so if I'm talking to a lieutenant in the Army who is responsible for 200 people who are logistics in Afghanistan, and I got a logistics job where I'm trying to do some cross-docking in the U.S., that's pretty comparable. I don't care if the person's never been in distribution in some industry. If that person's got it, they have an opportunity to take that job. But if they've never managed anything as big as that, the complexity of that, then, hey, they are a bit light. Or if they've managed something twice as big, they wouldn't want the job because they'd be bored in a week. So the idea is focus on what people need to do and become. Ask people, what's the biggest thing you've ever done, and see if they're close. That should be how we screen. I'm not going to even discuss that. So thinking backwards is part of it, and that's a lot of the reason why the question came up. Say, JJ, any questions there now? Let's kind of get into some dialogue here.
Yeah, actually, we've got a couple of questions around the same topic, and actually they're both two different sides of the same coin. One, the question is, from a candidate's point of view, does it make a difference if you select a project or a task that's in the distant past versus something that's more current? And then also the hiring manager side of that, what if a candidate, when you ask that question, what if a candidate responds with a task or project that's in the distant past? How do you respond to that?
Okay, so I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is. The right answer is what's most important, what's the biggest one you've ever done. That's why, and if it was 10 years in the past, I mean, let me just give you this. My biggest accomplishment of all time from a practical, and I'm 66 years old, guys, so I'm not any young spring chicken here, was when I turned around a company when I was 28 years old. I worked for Henry Kissinger's brother, Walter Kissinger. I took over a project. Nobody said it could be done, and I did it. Biggest project I've ever done. That is the biggest project. I don't do that today. It is my most satisfying project? No. It's other stuff I enjoyed even more. I even mentioned to a class this morning, another project I had was distant. I still love what I do today. So the answer is, it is what it is. I'm not going to tell you the right answer. So if you mislead me right away and say, my biggest swing was last week, and then I find out during the interview that, well, you did 10 years ago, you did something a lot bigger, I'd say, well, why'd you mislead me? So the thing is, you got to tell the truth. Now, I'm interviewing you as a candidate, and you did your biggest thing was 10 years ago. I might have my initial reaction is, I'm a little bit concerned this person is not growing as fast. But if you're still passionate, and I remember talking with an engineer at Texas Instruments. His biggest thing was designing patents in about 10 years ago. And his current biggest thing was still designing patents. But it was a group session, and the president of the division was there, and he said, thank God, he is our best designer in the world. He's a world-class guy. We hope he stays here for the rest of his career. The point is, if you're really good at what you do, and you love doing it, and you still love doing it recently, you're a perfect candidate. So I think you got to look at it as it's a benchmark to say the biggest thing you've done. If you've done something a little bit different today, but you're very good at it, that's fine. But at least I now know the information, so it doesn't really matter. But I guess the advice I would give to a candidate is don't try to rethink the process. Just say it straight. The problem is going to happen, guys, from a candidate perspective, is you're not going to ask. I don't think you're going to get that question asked. I mean, if we train a lot. We train, just so you guys know, as a company. What we do as a company. My company trains managers around the world, literally around the world. We're now. Somebody in our company's got to be in China in three weeks, and I'm not going. But we're training managers in China. We're training managers in India. I was in Russia last summer for 10 days. We're training managers there. We train managers and recruiters around the world. The amount of recruiters and managers we train around the world is minuscule. Even if they've read the book, which is not minuscule, they'll ask you some dumb questions. You, as a candidate, have to say, within 5 or 10 minutes of the interview, say, could you please just give me a little bit more detail about the job, some of the real projects the person's going to work on? And then what you're going to say is, I'd like to give you an example of some work that I've done. Now, in your job from a prep standpoint, you've got to write down, hey, my biggest projects I've worked on were A, B, C, and D, and have all the detail there. But you're now selecting which project best fits the job that needs to be done. The manager's standpoint, he or she should make sure that the work is reasonably current and you still enjoy doing it. If a project you've done 7 years ago and is designing building architecture and you don't like to do that anymore, but you're going to make the call and say, I could do it, but I just don't want to do it. So competency and motivation are critical here. Any other questions, JJ, related to that? Because I want to we'll take as many as we can. There's not a lot of content. I mean, there's some content, but there's not necessarily that much.
Tons and tons of questions coming in about this biggest accomplishment. One of them, if you are very experienced in your career and you have a lot of accomplishments, how do you narrow it down to one? Or is it okay to give them like 2 or 3 to choose from?
That's a good question. Here's the way, so let me be real frank of the practicality of how this would work. When I interview a candidate, I don't ask that question first. I did it for the interview. I mean, the way I normally do it is I would review the candidate's profile or resume. I'm looking for certain things in there, but as I'm looking for, because I would normally, as an interview, I would know the job. So let's assume that person does know the job. I'm looking through your person's background. I say, Mary, I see that you, at company A, you've done this and this. At company B, you've done this and this. What would you say your biggest thing you did and when you really enjoyed working at company A, and what did you look working at company B? So this is the first 15, 20 minutes of reviewing your background to see if there's just a general fit. I'm seeing if there's any of the work that you've done fits in my job. So rather than me say, what's the most significant thing you've done at all time, would be, hey, Mary, can you tell me about this? Because I need somebody to launch a new product line. Can you tell me where you did this at this company? So I, as a good interviewer, would force the question. Later on, I might just say, Mary, you got a pretty interesting background. Tell me what of all the stuff you've done, what do you think is the biggest one of all these things? So I might not ask that question first. I would ask a variation of it that's most related to my job. If your background is reasonably close and one of the things you've done more recently is consistent with what I need, I would probably then say, hey, let's speak in a little bit more depth. So that's the way it should be done. So I've got to say it's not necessarily why the most significant accomplishment question is interesting. I probably wouldn't ask it first. I mean, obviously, in a 500-word blog post, I can't get into all that kind of stuff, but that's the reality of it. Let me kind of go one step further, JJ, and if you've got some other good questions, we can go to there too.
Yep, lots of
I guess hiring the best person is not just about interviewing the person. So let me just kind of go through here why defining the job is so important. And I'll do this. This is part of a training. We'd probably spend 2 hours on it. I'll spend 3 or 4 minutes. In fact, we're talking to a company in the Middle East, and I just showed her this chart, and she fell in love with it. She's a recruiter for 10 years, and she said, how do you get away from managers who focus so much on skills and experience? So this is for recruiters, this is for managers, and this is for you, the candidate, to figure how you could pull it off here. But recognize, guys, that I prep my candidates, and I don't do a lot of recruiting anymore, but I used to spend 15 minutes to a half hour prepping candidates, so I would tell them all of this stuff. So it's, but in this case, I work very closely with recruiters and hiring managers today. And I basically say, I don't like job descriptions. I hate them. I hate job descriptions. They don't mean anything. Skills, experience, all that stuff. And I ask people, I ask managers, I said, have you ever met, if someone has all that stuff, are they guaranteed to be successful? They say, of course not. I said, have you ever met somebody who's really successful without all that stuff? They say, yeah. I said, so why do we use it? If it doesn't predict success and you met people who aren't successful, why do you use it? And they said, well, what should we use? What should we use? So I said, why don't you tell me about the work? Let's define success. So here's the question I ask. What would the person need to do to be considered a top 25% person? What would they actually have to accomplish in terms of work? This is describing the job. That's why I say, if you don't describe the job up front, but how are you going to possibly make an assessment? And what's interesting is when they define the job, it's always outcomes. They have to grow sales by 10% in the Northeast Territory. They've got to take over the lead of launching a new product line. They've got to build a team of accountants to launch the new accounting module. They got to evaluate the maintenance process and figure out a way to go from 98% uptime in machines to 99.9. They do stuff. They work with a team they develop a new battery circuit, working with marketing, product marketing, and the outside vendor. They do stuff. I want to know what people need to do. And you as a candidate should know what people need to do. So that's why I say, if you don't know that, you've got to ask the question early on. But when you think about it, performance, the work, determines the skills you need. I mean, this is getting into the logic of this, but if a person can do that work, if they can do it, I guarantee they have exactly the right level of skills, exactly the right level. Different industries, some people need 5 years, some need 10. Some people have this industry, some people don't have that industry. But if you can prove they can do that work by asking an accomplishment, hey, tell me where you did something like that, same most significant accomplishment question, but it's tell me about it, your major accomplishment related to building a team to launch a new product line. Well, now I've kind of figured out they can do something similar. They're in the game. Skills don't predict. Having this doesn't predict performance. Performance determines what skills you need. I don't want to get into mathematics or the logic of it, but performance profile is a primary driver. Skills are dependent on the work you need done. They don't determine the work you need done. And this is the real difference maker. It's what you do with what you have that makes a person successful. So when I conduct an interview, I say, hey, first figure out what you have, and then maybe figure out what you accomplished with it. And the right way for hiring is focus on what they're going to do, convince that person, hey, if you do it well, you can become something, and don't worry so much about what that person has or what you're going to get. If this job is motivating, obviously you got to pay you fairly. I don't want to minimize that, but the focus should be on, hey, if this is a great job, we'll make the money work for you. But don't focus on what's the money in it, and don't focus on it from a company standpoint. They got to filter them out for all these skills. Now, there's some of you in the room who are in HR recruiting. You say, oh, we can't do that. We got legal obligations. Well, bunko. I've got the largest labor firm in the United States, Littler Mendelson, that said this performance role is far more objective and legally defensible than a job description. If you've ever promoted somebody into that job who didn't have those skills, you can see how flawed it is. This is objective criteria. And everybody should be evaluated against that objective criteria, not against this artificial filter of skills and experience, which we've kind of got as the rigmarole of we've kind of fell into an illogical problem. We can perpetuate it. But when you focus on what people do and become, all of a sudden you have a chance of, hey, maybe we get the right people who are motivated and competent to do this work. Let me do one other slide here, JJ, and open it up. Now let me open it up for thoughts, comments, and questions. We got a half hour here, so JJ, come up with some good ones.
Oh, I have a lot. I'm trying to group them together into subject matter. So regarding that question, you talked previously about if somebody has a lot of experience, but what if somebody is coming in with not so much experience, either they're just out of school or they're re-entering the workforce after being a parent, or if they have unrelated accomplishments? How do you make all of those tie together?
Well, now that's a lot. I mean, that's a whole 4-hour course on just that content. The idea that I would kind of go through, let's assume you've got lots of experience, and I remember one guy, and this has to be 15 years ago, similar, and I don't know why I was invited to some presentation in the mid-90s by some outplacement group, and they were working with people, and the PhD in chemistry said, I keep on getting excluded because I say I have too much experience. I said, well, you might have too much experience. He said, well, I'm a PhD in chemistry, and I've done this, and I've done that, and I know how to design chemical processes in this. And the PhD says, well, I bet you can, but have you done any of that recently? And he said, what does that matter? I said, because motivation is the key. You might be competent to do something, but I, as a hiring manager, aren't going to hire you unless you're motivated to do it. And when was the last time you really got motivated to do that work? He said, 10 years ago. I said, well, you are overqualified. You'd rather manage a team and work on high-level strategy and architecture kind of stuff, not working in detailed design work. So you are overqualified. So now I go back to this person. I don't care how many years experience you have. I care if you're competent to do it and you're motivated to do it recently. So if you've done something 15 years ago and you're looking for a job that's, and I want to say beneath you in quotes or parentheses, if you don't love this work, you're only taking the job for some economic reason. And I can appreciate that the economic reason is real, and you believe that you will work hard, but if you know Maslow at all, hierarchy of needs, once that need is satisfied, you won't like it anymore. You're motivated because of the economic need, because of the work. I, as a recruiter, want you motivated because you're going to be doing this work. And if you said, hi, Lou, you really love that work and you can prove it to me, he said, I'm going to give you a shot at it. Now, go to bat with a hiring manager to prove that you can do the work. Now, you got to prove that you've done it recently and you enjoy it. Now, if somebody's come back out of the workforce, I was with Career Builder yesterday. We talked about how do you help some of these people going in. I would say if you've been out of the workforce, you left 10 years to raise a family, which certainly is remarkable. I would not use that as your most significant accomplishment, guys, though I'd do something that's business-like. Even if you help raise money for a church, I would say that's reasonable, but it's got to be related to the job you're looking at. I look for people when they were not doing work, were they still trying to improve themselves. So if you were an accountant, you raised a family, and you came back in the workforce, I placed a lot of accountants, but you studied up on all the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, you learned about what the new systems were, you took some classes at night school to get back up to speed, I'd say, I'm working on work, you're going to get a job somewhere. That initiative, that drive, that desire to become better at what you are, and it's what you can do for the company, not what the company can do for you, but what you can do for yourself. If you can demonstrate that level of self-improvement and staying current, somebody's going to hire you. Because it's as much about your attitude as it is about the work you can do. So is that, that's pretty decent answers, right? Let's take one more, and I want to kind of show the model for hiring so you guys can see how this applies together.
I'm not sure if you addressed it. Does that also apply to people who are just out of school? Could they use a school accomplishment or school things as their most significant accomplishment?
Yeah, you can't ask me too many questions, JJ. You know I've got a short attention span. Oh, absolutely. So for example, I was in Chicago. I interviewed, I don't know if she's on the class, if Lou Lee is on the call here, delightful young woman. I asked, and she's out of school, I said, what's your biggest accomplishment? Now, it's not, what are you really proud of? And I said, what really gets you excited? So you could just see her started getting into this excitement of a project she worked on. So yeah, it's, now obviously when you're in school, you don't have necessarily as many accomplishments, but if you've led a project, you've led some extracurricular activity, you set up a program with the community to do something, you've had some leadership roles, and I could see that you've taken on and influenced people, that would be perfectly fine. Obviously, it's not going to let you run a team of 100 people, but I think, wow, this person's certainly a player, can influence people, can challenge the status quo, can deal with higher level people, can communicate cross-functionally. I'd say you're in the game here. And that's what people should do, and we actually help companies develop these 30-minute on-campus interviews to how to separate candidates very quickly about what they've accomplished to see if they've done something that's clearly in the top 25% of their peer group. Okay, let me do one more, I think 2 more slides I've got here, and we'll open up for questions. I call this the hiring formula for success. So you guys can think about it if you're a candidate. You can think about it if you're a recruiter or a hiring manager hiring people. And many of you are on both sides of the desk. You know, now you're looking for a job, but next week you're hiring people. So I call this also, and if you don't know the term, don't worry so much about it, the universal competency model. But companies go out and they look for what they call competencies, basic behaviors, drive, initiative, communication skills, and they kind of say, we're looking for people who have this, this, and that. And this is our company. Well, I've looked at hundreds of these. They're all the same. They just have different words. So I boiled it down to what I call the universal competency model, or the formula for success. And you'll see why that most significant accomplishment question allows you to figure this out. There are really 4 big buckets of factors. You know, I like to put stuff as simply as possible, but sometimes it's not that simple. But talent is one of them. Your ability to do the work, your ability to learn how to do the work is the biggest bucket. You got to have some level of talent. You have to have what I call management skills, which, and most people ignore this one, it's getting work done on time. Okay, you got talent, but if you don't get stuff done on time, you're never going to get any stuff done. I was with a major high-tech firm training all their engineers, and you know this company well. It's Fortune, great place to work. And I asked the engineers, they only interview on talent. I said, well, did any of your products ever get delayed or not done on time? And they giggled. It wasn't important to get stuff done on time to meet a production schedule. So I said, guys, that's what, even doing your work, getting your daily work done, organizing your daily work, prioritizing your daily work, managing the work of others. I mean, all of that stuff is important. So I look at management, and they call that a soft skill. It's a non-technical skill. It's not soft. It's critical. So talent, the ability to do the work, organizing the work of others and yourself is critical. Working with others as a team. This is Daniel Goleman's stuff. EQ, emotional quotient, influencing people, coaching people, being coached, cooperating, persuading people. So when I asked the most significant accomplishment question, I asked, if you notice, who's on the team? Part of it, I couldn't make the question, is there anybody on the team you influenced that was above you? Was there anybody on the team in another function you influenced, in another department? So I wanted to understand if you can communicate cross-functionally. So when I asked that question, I mean, you wouldn't get it just from that 500-word article, but you start realizing that, wow, why did you get assigned to the team? I mean, you might be very quiet, but you were assigned to a team with a company president, someone in engineering, someone in manufacturing, someone in accounting. Why would they assign that person to that team? Even if you're quiet, so whether I like you or not is immaterial. Somebody else said, well, you're pretty cool, we're assigning you to this team. So that's why it's important to really understand these team skills and the team dynamics. Okay, thinking skills. Logic here can go. The other one is, can you make decisions based on the job you need? For an engineer, making a decision is different than a call center, talking to somebody in customer service, different than a waitress, different than a restaurant manager, different than somebody running a business. But for every job, you have to, the information isn't all black and white, use shades of gray. Can you deal with ambiguity? Can you take information, make trade-offs? Do you think just technically? Do you think business-wise? All of those things are critical. So I've got the 4 buckets of skills: talent, management, thinking, and team. But they all have to be filtered through the actual job itself. What's the job? Do you want to do this work? Let me kind of just say this. Collectively, they get filtered through the job itself, who you're working for in the company culture. That drives motivation. So if I really had to say my short formula for success is ability to do the work and motivation to do the work. Ability and motivation. Ability without motivation is a waste of time. And that's why I really don't like people who take jobs for economic reasons. Very few people are totally motivated in all circumstances. I want to find out, tell me about an accomplishment that you just totally motivated, that just got you going. And I'll understand all the parameters there. Because I got a job to fill, I've got a manager you're going to work with, and I got a culture you got to deal with. So I want a person who has got the talent and motivation to do the work. But motivation isn't an independent variable, meaning most people aren't motivated to do all work all the time. It's a function of the type of work you're doing, who you're doing it with, the manager. Let's be real frank, guys. I don't care if you fit with the company culture. If you don't like your manager, your history. And if you do like the manager, and the manager is a leader and a mentor, and you're really excited about it, well, you'll work harder. So maybe your motivation is attributed to the leader. So it doesn't matter what it is. I want to understand the source of your motivation. And I get that through the most significant accomplishment question. So this is a little bit of a challenging chart to understand, but you have to understand from my frame of reference of training managers how to interview, training, understanding it. If you don't understand the job, I don't understand you, the manager, and your style of leading and developing people, and I don't understand the company culture, it's random whether you'll get the right answer. But the most significant accomplishment question allows me to piece that information together. I'm going to, JJ, let's take a few more questions. I want to kind of I have one or two other points I want to make, but we've got time to ask questions. So any thoughts, comments, or questions based on that? Let's leave it there. Or even other questions related to the whole concept. I know this is kind of an advanced concept, guys, but it's less advanced for a hiring manager and a recruiter. But for you as a candidate, you got to kind of think, how am I making decisions and how can I fit with that? So I was thinking maybe I shouldn't show this, but I did, so we're there. Questions, JJ?
Yeah, and lots of questions about the motivation and the growth. So how does a manager screen or be able to tell that somebody has a growth opportunity, and how does a candidate convince the manager that they do have that motivation and that growth?
Cool question. I want to hold that one off, though, JJ, because that's really what I'm going to show next. Okay. Let me just say generally, and I'll do specifically. During the MIQ, the most important accomplishment question, one of the questions, and it was clearly there, it says, where did you go the extra mile? Where did you take the initiative? And I try to get 2 or 3 examples for that. And I'm trying to see, is there a pattern? What I'm going to do in the next slide is say, I don't just ask that question once, I ask it multiple times to see a pattern over time of your accomplishments. Are they growing? Are they flat? But within that accomplishment, I'm saying this person took the initiative, always in helping others, always in coaching and advising other people. Or it could have been you took the initiative on really handling the most toughest technical challenges. Or it could have been you took the initiative on doing quality work that was just perfect. You'd stay late at night and you wouldn't send a product out unless it was absolutely perfect. Well, now all of a sudden I see asking about where you went the extra mile initiative, I'm starting to see what is the circumstances that drive you. Are they external, meaning is it your boss, or is it internal to you? This is an intrinsic, oh, I just love doing that work. Well, now I start seeing a pattern of where you took the motivation. So that's actually how it is. I'm going to put it all together here in the puzzle. And from a manager's standpoint, you'll see what I'm trying to do. So the quick answer, then I'll kind of show it to you in a second here. I know that because I've already asked you, the manager, you need someone to launch a new product line. It's got 4 or 5 people in the department. You got a budget of $3 or $4 million. You got to get it launched in 7 or 8 months, whatever it may be. So I'm asking the candidate, hey, what have you know, we got to launch a new product line. Tell me about your toughest product line you ever launched. How many people are on the team? What were the circumstances? What was the time pressures you had? I'm saying, this person looks pretty good, but boy, they had 2 years to do it. They just haven't handled the pressure of a startup or a real rapid-paced organization. So that would kind of add a risk to me. On the other hand, if the person was a little bit lighter, said I was throwing it over my head, I had 2 people reporting to me, I had to get this thing done in 6 months, and it was really a year project, and here's how I did it. I said, well, I'd probably, the person, it'd be a bit of a stretch, but if the person worked for me, Kathy Smith, whomever she may be, Kathy is just this person who'll take the bull by the horns and make it happen. I'm willing to try to pull that off. So that's how I would kind of benchmark their experience and all this stuff together. It's not just the absolutes here. Talent, team, all of that's important, but boy, you've got to filter through the actual situational variables, the job, the manager, culture. Oops. Well, I screwed that up. No, I didn't. Yeah, in words, here's my formula for success. That's to pick the words. It says talent plus management plus team plus thinking skills in relationship to the job, the manager, and cultural fit times motivation squared. So the formula itself is, which is that graph I said, hey, I'm looking at talent, I'm looking at management, I'm looking at team, looking at thinking, but I'm comparing that always to the job, the manager's style, and the cultural, the situation of the culture, which largely is dependent on the pace of the organization. And that sees, then I know, are they motivated to do it in circumstances? I got somebody. The way I get at it is, hey, I just tell the person, one of our big projects is such and such. What have you done that's most comparable? The question I did in the blog post was, just a variation of the question is, tell me about your most major significant accomplishment. I probably wouldn't start there. That's why I said it's kind of, I didn't fake anybody out. It's an important question. I use it. And I think somebody else, a lot of the comments people said, well, I focused that accomplishment on work I need done. And so that was the right answer. But I also want to know, from a critical standpoint, when was the biggest thing you've ever done? If it was 10 years ago, I got to make the call is, are you still motivated to do the work today? So it's still an important benchmark of where you did it. But let me ask you this. Now, I didn't really ask you the question, but how would you feel? So let's assume you're sitting in my office and I interview you and say, tell me about a major accomplishment or your most significant accomplishment. And then I had the patient say, when did you do it? Why did you do it? Why were you chosen? What were the challenges you faced? Where did you take the initiative? Who was on the team? How did you influence others? Where did you screw up? How did you make your biggest decision? And I asked you all that question. It really took 15 or 20 minutes. Do you think I'd learn a lot about you as a person? First, just and you type that, I'll look at the question panel here and see what comes in. Would I learn a lot about you as a person under that? Do you see anything?
Lots of yeses, absolutely.
Okay, so
surely.
Of course you would. Yeah. In fact, I'd learn, and you might even want to type in what the interview would learn about you if it actually took place. What would they learn most about you if that took place? I mean, what are you passionate about? What would come out of that? Not only the biggest thing, but what would be some, put them in real words. Yes, consistency between interviews, answers, and questions do matter. I just saw that there. I mean, what comes up here is drive, initiative, what you're passionate about, problem solving, dealing with people, helping others, learning. You learn a lot. All of those are behaviors. It's all that stuff that I call in that competency. It's all that stuff around it. I also learn the consistency of it. Because I'm going to ask the same question again. Well, tell me about it. So if you gave me an accomplishment 7 years ago, I would tell me about your biggest accomplishment in your last job. And if you gave me the accomplishment in your last job, I would say, well, tell me about your biggest accomplishment in a prior job. I want to see and this is called, from a technical standpoint, the behavioral consistency interviewing approach. But you have to relate it in relationship to the job. Now, here's another question I just want to ask you, and this is very, very critical. How would you feel because I like as many people as we can answer this question. How would you feel about the interviewer, particularly if it was your potential new boss? How would you feel about working for that person if they were inquisitive and really wanted to understand, they really appreciated what you did, and they were listening to you? How would you feel about your potential new boss under those circumstances? They asked you this question. Great, instant rapport, would feel great, feel great. Yeah, to me, guys, this is an important part of you as a manager asking this question. I have debriefed hundreds, if not thousands, of people after they've interviewed. And I ask, why do you want this job? And it's always, I want that work, and I really want to work for that person. And study after study after study after study is the work itself and who you're doing it for are the primary drivers why people take offers. I'm a recruiter here, guys. I never have enough money in the budget. You want X, the company has 90% of X. 30 years it's always way. Never had enough money in the budget. So I just figured back 30 years ago, I said, I'm not going to fight the damn budget anymore. You're going to get 90% of what you want. The only way you're going to take 90% of what you want is if this is a job that makes you, put you on a faster growth track, so a year from now you get 110% of what you want, and you work for people you want to work for. And while I ask that question and I get a good answer, which is important, by the hiring manager asking that, they not only get the right answer, they also develop a relationship with the candidate that, hey, you know this person. When you say this person's a career move, it's because you've validated them into work they've done. That, to me, is as important a value of this whole question as anything else. I got a bunch of stuff here, what the value is of the question. You take, number one, you start the recruiting process. You determine a gap between the candidate's background and your job. It forces you to listen rather than over-talk, and you make an objective decision, not a biased decision. If you really did the accomplishment, guys, it makes you less nervous. That's why I say prepare, prepare, prepare. Candidates always get nervous. That woman got nervous, and I'm sure she was a remarkable person. She had a nervous laugh, and the president didn't like her. It was dumb. Who cares? Everybody gets nervous. Do they get nervous on the job? That's a problem. But they get nervous in an interview, not a problem. That's just, everybody gets nervous. But if somebody got nervous, they say, well, the person get nervous in the job, or they get nervous all the time. If they never get nervous all the time, then who cares? Just human nature. The critical issue, you got to ask everybody the same question. Peeling the onion is really the value. The question itself is the setup, peeling the onion. But what I also do is I ask the same question for different periods of time. That's the critical issue, is I ask it and I get a little bit more precise. What was your biggest accomplishment related to this? What was your biggest team accomplishment? What was your biggest individual accomplishment? So I ask the most significant accomplishment question, the MIQ, most important, but I call it the MSA too, as I start seeing this trend line over individual and team over time. That, to me, is the real value of the question. And if the line is going up, hey, the person's still growing. If the line is flattened, I'm concerned unless the person is doing quality. They're probably not going to take on a bigger job, but they might be exceptional at the work they do, and I'm fine with that. They're still an A player. They might get this minor bigger job, but they're not going to get it. But they just don't have a track record to get a bigger super job. But if they're doing A quality work, who cares? I'm hiring them. They're a starter on my team any day of the week. So it's asking the question, and also I ask about the team. What teams were you assigned? You probably wouldn't have picked that up in just the bullet points in the blog post, but I'm always asking about the team. Karen, why'd you get assigned this team? Who was on the team? And I remember talking to a young woman. She was about 3 years ago. She was out of St. Louis. I needed to put her in a spot, an HR job in a non-positive geographic area. And she was quiet, but her resume looked really good. And I was talking to her, and I said, I don't remember her name. I assume it's Carol. Carol, have you ever dealt with executives? I just asked her that question. She was an HR manager. She said, yes, I'm dealing with the president. And she worked for a division of a company. And I said, was that the division president? Which HR, she was, that would not be unusual that an HR manager would deal with the division president. And she said, no, the corporate president. This is the corporate president of a Fortune 100 company. And she's in the division in St. Louis, and the corporation was back in the East Coast somewhere. And I said, oh, what was the project? She said, oh, I'm on the team to put the high potential group together for the whole corporation. We're totally revamping, and I'm on I'm on the team to do it. How many people are on the team? Oh, 6 of us. So out of a whole corporation of $30 billion, she was on a team of 6 people. She says, oh yeah, I'm meeting the corporate president next week to demonstrate what we want to do. And she was very quiet and withdrawn. And I'm thinking her resume looked good, but the voice didn't sound good. Then I just said, are you on the high potential team? And sheepishly, she said, yes. I said, well, how'd you get there? She said, oh, when I was started in 6 months, we had a real union problem, and I worked very closely with, and she went on this whole description of how she solved a huge problem at 22 years old or 23, and all of a sudden the president of the company, the president of the union, lauded her about it, and then all of a sudden she got into, and she didn't say that in her resume. It had one point, work with union on industrial relations. All of a sudden, it might have, 23, you're putting that kind of, she took over. It was just remarkable. Unfortunately, I didn't close her because her husband she wanted to go back to this area. It was a done deal. As a recruiter, I was so excited. Then the day before the final interview, said, Lou, my husband just got transferred to France, and I have to go. So I was so disappointed, but I'm sure that's probably 5 years ago. She's a remarkable person. Okay, this is what this course was about, or the MIQ was about, solving this problem. Some idiot did a poor job matching my skills to my assignment. And that's what it's about, guys. You got to understand a person's ability. You got to understand what motivates them. You got to understand the work they're doing. And your job in the interview, if you're interviewing candidates, is get that fit right. If you're a candidate, you got to get that fit right too. Because I guarantee if you get the fit wrong, you take the job for economic reasons. And I can totally appreciate the need to do that. You've got to get back in the workforce. But I'd still say if you're in the interview, and the recruiter or the hiring manager doesn't, or the HR rep doesn't know the job, you've got to find out, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the job, what they need done? I'd like to tell you a couple about my accomplishments that might be related to that. You do that, you'll solve a lot of these problems. So let's open it up next 5 minutes for questions, and I got one final call to action here, which is really basically buy my book. It'll be out next week. If my publisher doesn't die first. Formatting a table of contents in Kindle is not easy. But, JJ, before that, a couple of questions. Let's handle as many as we can before the bottom of the hour.
Yeah, you bet. A lot of questions about what you mentioned, asking the question several times. What if your company has panel interviews or puts their candidates through a series of interviews with different managers? Do they ask about the same accomplishments, or do they seek different accomplishments? And then, therefore,
okay, can we just answer that? Isn't that a good question?
Yeah, sure. There's the other side of that as well. I'd love to get to.
Let's just answer that one.
Okay, perfect.
In a panel interview, the idea, and we train, I love panel interviews because they take the emotions out of it. The idea is you have one lead interviewer who says, okay, we need someone to design this product or run our call center. Can you tell us about something you've done that's most similar? Everybody else asks the fact-finding questions. So the leader asks the main question. The leader can also be a fact-finder. When did you do it? Why did you do it? How did you do it? But all the other people should only support the lead interviewer. Follow a thread just like you're on an email thread. You just follow up with more information. Ask for lots of examples. Only the leader can change the question. Okay, let's now talk about a different accomplishment. So that, to me, that's a great way to organize a panel interview. And in our hiring manager training, we do that. That's how we actually practice that whole thing. Particularly now you're one of the interviewers, you're hearing all the same information in some logical order, peeling the onion the same way. And I love panel interviews that way. For a series of sequential interviews, I could say to some of the attendees, let me just look at the attendee list here very quickly. Where did the attendee list go? I thought I had it. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. Amber's on the team. Andrea's on the team. Anna's on the team. Joe's on the team. Barb's on the team. Well, let's say, Joe, you handle accomplishments related to team. Barbara, you handle the biggest technical accomplishment. Mary, you handle the cultural fit and the manager style accomplishment. So you can actually break down the same question, but have people take all the issues with respect to the hiring format and focus on getting accomplishments related to that. Then when you degroup, when you come together, each one owns a subset. The idea is I hate everybody making a yes-no decision. You cannot make a yes-no decision logically about a candidate in 30 to 45 minutes. But a well-structured interview where you spent 45 minutes or an hour with a person focusing on one or two narrow factors, asking the most significant accomplishment question, bringing it together, the team has a remarkable set of data. So that's how I organize that. JJ, next half, or another question that's related.
Yeah, the next half of that is, should a candidate be prepared with several accomplishments to talk about?
Excellent question, and totally different, but so yes. Let's say from a practice, I'm not testing it, so my belief is, let's assume that Betty Sullivan's my candidate. I don't really care, Betty, if you're a good interviewer or not. That's my responsibility. I do care about what you've accomplished. So I would tell you, hey, Betty, you know, I got to do this. Let's dig into your biggest accomplishment here. In fact, you know, I want to interview in more depth later on. Why don't you tell me about where you built that team? I want to talk to you about that tomorrow when we have our full interview. And I want to also talk about how you kind of make business decisions and trade-off, because we don't have enough time to do everything right. So I want candidates to prep. I really do want them to think about accomplishments. Because it's not, to me, I'm not measuring your interviewing skills. I'm measuring your ability to do this work. And that's why you cannot fake it. Now, if I tell you I'm looking for this, I'll prove that, hey, you said 20 people? Well, it's only 17 people. Tell me the names of the 17 people if you gave me 7. Who was the easiest to manage? Who was the hardest to manage? How did you coach and develop those people? What are those people doing now? Boy, they're not linked into you. Why? This is a person you said you developed. I'm looking at, are they connected to you on LinkedIn? So all of a sudden, you cannot lie about this stuff, guys. So I don't care about how you, that's me. That doesn't mean that, but I'm a different interviewer than most other people. So I do want you to prep. Now, if you're a candidate, here's what I would suggest you do from a prep standpoint. Write down the 5 or 6 things you do best, and then come up with a story or an accomplishment that proves that. Write down a couple of things that you don't like, but how you grew and developed as a person. Well, I really don't like doing detail work, but here's how I handle it and here's how I manage it. So just write that stuff down. Be prepared with half a dozen. So now you got figuring out your skills. Here's an accomplishment to prove that you're driven. Here's an accomplishment to prove you can influence people. Here's an accomplishment you can prove that you've dealt with tough business challenges. Then come up with a separate list, and it might overlap a little bit, 2 or 3 big things you've done as an individual, and the 2 or 3 big things you've done as a team, and the role, and kind of go through that same question, and buy my book, which will give you more guidance on it. But now any question people say, well, tell me about where you really led a team. Well, you pick one of those accomplishments. Well, they might ask you major accomplishment, might ask a specific one, hey, where'd you launch a product? So whatever it is, you have enough preparation to do it. So yeah, I believe it's a long answer to prep, but without question. Okay, last question, Jake. Well, let me do this, and we'll take one more question. Okay, my last slide, we've got all the Q&A, is please, it's $9.95, the book. It'll be ready on Amazon next week if I can get the formatting. There's a lot of internal links in the book and the table of contents, so it's really a pretty good guidebook for recruiters, managers, and candidates. The problem is when you convert to Kindle, 500 internal links. We didn't know about this till 2 weeks ago, and doing them by hand is very challenging. So it's not geared for a lot of internal links back and forth, and that's the whole value of the book. But we'll get there. My publisher, who is my son, formatting it, has been up 72 hours straight, so trying to get it right. I have a company that is geared to, not to candidates. The only thing we have at candidates, well, we do stuff with a career builder, which will be very candidate-facing. Book, Hire With Your Head. I urge you to buy it. I'd like you to. It'll be invaluable. If not, tell me, and then I'll rewrite it to make it valuable. For recruiters, if you're a recruiter, we do a full class. We have a live workshop in February if you're in the LA area. I'd love to have you there. You go to our website to find it. We have an online class. If you're not around in LA, you do the same class online. It starts a week from today, 1st of February. For hiring managers, we have a 2-part class where recruiters and managers come together. And you'll get an email from us. I think you'll get an email to say this kind of stuff's going on, and we'd like to stay in touch with you and get our newsletters. Our newsletters are largely geared to recruiters and hiring managers, but we're coming up with another candidate-facing site that will offer advice to candidates. So hopefully you found that valuable, guys. Also, if everybody could, we have the senior partner at Littler Mendelson who wrote the white paper for the book. but I asked him to do it. And this is Whitler Mendelson's largest labor law firm in the world. The guy fell in love with it. He said, Lou, it isn't going to fly. He read the book. He said, Lou, I'm totally wrong. Your performance profile, your interviewing methodology, the way you apply, right on. It will minimize any law obligation whatsoever and maximize compliance with any legal law in the United States. He was just pure advocate. Company, is that right, the name of the company? LouAdler.com, LouAdlerGroup.com? I guess we have a new website. I don't use that one because it's just new. LouAdler.com, LouAdlerGroup.com. You want to send an email, info@adlerconcepts.com. That's right, JJ?
LouAdlerGroup.com is our website, and then if you want to send an email, it's info@adlerconcepts.com. But I'll include all that in the follow-up email that you'll get.
So let's take one last question. Any last question that just is so pithy that we have to say it, JJ?
Oh gosh, there are so many questions, Lou. It's hard to narrow it down to just one.
You got 30 seconds now, and I got a minute to answer it.
Okay.
So
okay.
don't screw it up. I know I know the pressure's on, JJ, but you handle pressure. That's why we hired you.
Okay. So how does this approach change when you're dealing with people moving more into consultancy type of roles or with temporary positions?
Okay, good answer. Good question. Well, I'd say from a hiring standpoint, well, just like I've hired a couple of interns right now to do project work for us, I try to make them a bit bigger than what they've done to stretch them. If they do the jobs well, I'll keep on stretching them, and I'll hire them full-time if I have that option to do it. If I was in a position looking for a job, I would say, why don't you hire me for a 30-day project and see how I do? That gives you a sense of if you want to do the work, and they get a sense of you. So if I'm hiring someone for a contract position, and we work with a lot of recruiters, third-party recruiters around the world who hire contractors to do technical work generally, I want people motivated to do that kind of work. So I think it's applicable, slightly different. But for a project, I'm going to say, okay, what do people successful have to do? They've got to quickly understand the project, they've got to quickly start implementing, they've got to quickly engage with people. So there's a set of criteria around it. There has to be less learning and more doing, but I still want people who do it well. So I think it works. It might be modified a little bit. Hey, guys, hopefully this is helpful. Follow me on LinkedIn. I have to say I've enjoyed that article and this thing as much as anything. So I learned as much from you guys as hopefully I give you back some information. Hopefully it works. Have a great weekend, guys. Hopefully I put you on a career, help us get your career you deserve. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Lou. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you with us. You will get a follow-up email that will have some of the information that Lou discussed, as well as how to contact Lou if you have other questions. So be looking for that in your email inbox. And we look forward to seeing you at future